Hello and welcome everyone. I'm Bart and I will be your host. Today, let me introduce you to our series of webinars, raising awareness about the most common problems and technologies that startups and companies face during their lifetime. Our webinars will consider things like software code quality importance, security, development processes, product maintenance, team management, and many others. To benefit from the webinars the most, I encourage you to participate throughout the entire series and ask a lot of questions. We're going to kick off today with probably the most important one, the one about security. There's a reason why we use locks in our doors, so let's not forget to do the same for our valuable businesses. My personal background is software engineering, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Untitled Kingdom. We're not just a software company. We also take care of service design, product strategy, UX and UI. All that based on our 10 years of experience on the market. Our team of experts build products from scratch, as well as optimize existing apps, stacking up in most effective and innovative tools and technologies to increase their value and safety. Companies that we work with are of various industries and sizes, different targets and stages of product development, but all of them with the one goal: to create products and services that solve real-life problems. Our role is to help them with this mission. According to our motto number 1, the digital future should be user-focused and needs-oriented. Technology is a tool that helps us improve people's lives every day. IoT, artificial intelligence, or virtual reality will redefine our daily activities if only we put enough effort to use it thoughtfully. And our motto number 2, sharing is caring. And that's why we're regularly distributing the latest and most relevant knowledge and how-to guidance not only to our partners and members, but also our friends and friends of our friends. Let's start today with a simple question I would like you to ask yourselves in your heads. Do you think the products or services you provide and create are secure right now? Also a follow-up one, what makes you think they are secure? You might think they are or they are not, but what is your answer based on? What kind of information or processes do you have in place to answer in all honesty? Do you have a holistic vision of the whole system or just its parts in isolation? Let me give you a couple of seconds right now to think about it. Okay, please hold on to those thoughts, or you can write them down for later. We'll try to see and talk about that after the presentation if you're gonna change your mind or not. Why I'm asking? We're living in times when there are a lot of startups trying to create something revolutionary, pioneer in one of the upcoming tech areas, be the first one to offer something new, so basically be ahead of the competition. And that's understandable, but unfortunately often leads to forgetting or at least postponing any efforts to make sure our users and our businesses are secure. The problem is, sometimes it might be too late for that. The best case scenario is that we might lose users' trust, and that is very difficult to regain. And the worst case, in production, well, you can imagine, implications might be catastrophic for a business. Also, making sure to meet all the necessary regulations for a given market is another thing to remember. GDPR, for example. Well, all in all, millions in fines or lawsuits. Security itself is a vast topic, and trying to cover everything under 30 minutes would be impossible. That's why today I would like you to focus on why should we care about it and show you real-world examples how simple mistakes can lead to considerable problems, to raise your awareness and try to show you what might be the first steps and who should be responsible for it in your organization. Okay, I'm talking about security for a couple of minutes, but what exactly do I mean by that word? Well, the most straightforward definition is that security is all about achieving a particular goal when there is an adversary present. So think of it as a bad guy trying to do something wrong with your system, app or data. It might be, for example, shutting the entire system down, stealing and sharing users' private data or your business data, trying to use or steal your technology to build a competitor product. So again, secure systems are the ones that can do something when whatever a bad guy is trying to do with it. That is why we need to apply some countermeasures and mitigation against hackers or anyone trying to compromise whatever we have achieved. Of course, I'm not asking anyone to know everything about security and try to do everything on your own. That would be impossible, and almost certainly there is not a single 100% secure system on the planet right now. It just might be a matter of million years to hack it right. It's a constant fight between us creators and the bad guys, hackers. It's about being aware of all the risks and costs that come with them to minimize the chances of something to go wrong, to something awful hit the fan. Small problems are way easier to fix. Also, earlier you want to change or improve something, the easier and cheaper it is. As Brian Tracy puts it, every minute you spend in planning saves 10 minutes in execution. That gives you 1000% return on energy. Some of the aspects we should be able to handle ourselves, and some it's definitely better to outsource to security experts. If we decide that's something we should take care of, or at least test properly before releasing to the public. So, who is responsible for security matter in your business, you may ask? Naturally, you could think that because developers and engineers are the ones to design, create, and maintain the system, they would be the ones to raise awareness and take care of all the security aspects. Well, that is true, but only partially. They are the ones to apply some of the countermeasures in code, no doubt about that. However, in every company and business, there should be someone who's driving force for the technological part of the company. They want to keep the business ahead of the latest cybersecurity and tech trends. I guess you can ask if that also falls in the CTO responsibilities, to both manage and overcome the connected threats as well. Well, indeed, CTOs are fundamentally not doing their job if they don't achieve this. Recently, security is becoming a big thing. Finally. Unfortunately, there had to be a lot of spectacular failures for some people to notice that it might be a problem for their businesses as well. It is very easy to forget about it, as during development, nothing will go very wrong to bring our attention, and our approach to development stays the same. We change and improve over time software development lifecycle, for example by moving from waterfall to more agile methodologies. But one problem remains the same. It is a common practice to perform a security-related tasks at the end of the process, if at all. This after-the-fact technique usually resulted in a high number of issues discovered too late, or not discovered at all. It is a far better practice to integrate activities across the software development lifecycle to help discover and reduce vulnerabilities early, effectively building security in and raising awareness throughout the whole team that it's not something we'll take care later on. There are a lot of different reasons why such practices are widespread, especially in a startup world these days. Let me point out a few to give you a perspective, or maybe is it going to be a yellow flag sometimes to make sure that everything is going in the right direction. First, and the most common one, are unrealistic deadlines to cut costs and stay ahead of the competition. Such an approach puts a lot of pressure on developers that will try to find shortcuts to deliver features no matter at what costs. And even when they don't, it is very easy to produce little coding mistakes that will come out at some point definitely, especially when no tests will be performed over the development time and before the release of the product to the market. Another thing is sometimes the lack of knowledge and awareness about security throughout developers. We are mainly working with smaller size companies. In big corporations, there are teams of developers working together in specific area of software development. In smaller companies, developers usually have to have a broader knowledge to be able to fulfill our feature requirements. So just that is a lot to ask. Security aspects is a whole another area of knowledge. It's not that they don't want to create great software. Most of the time they do, but very often without even thinking about it. That's why one of the CTO roles is to raise awareness of the importance of software security. On the other hand, it's not smart to require 100% secure systems. That would be a waste of time and money. With proper risk assessment, we only take care of those most crucial parts of our system. I will get to that later on. Next might be the problem of developing software in isolation. What I mean by that is that usually our system will consist of several different parts, like server, maybe a mobile application, and some hardware. And each developer working on his part is not looking at the system holistically and might not see threats that this brings, like validation or limiting the number of requests to log in. Wrong assumptions that someone else is gonna take care of that is usually false. And just because in a different project it was implemented like this, doesn't mean it will work this time. And that is another role of the CTO, to make sure everyone understands the whole product and not just the parts of it. That can also lead to forgetting to cover certain scenarios which might get exploited by the attacker. Of course, if developers don't follow known good software development standards, it's the whole another problem, and our responsibility is to make sure that the quality of the software used and created for our solution is on a good level. Quite dangerous might be forgetting about security after our product is launched as well, even if all tests and development process went smoothly and according to current standards. Unfortunately, sometimes, for example, encryption algorithms might get outdated over time. Computing power is increasing every year, and sometimes bugs and security loopholes are discovered in secure in their times algorithms or frameworks. It is important to have a process in place requiring review of our system once in a while. Situations where no quality assurance or testing procedures are involved in development are unacceptable. It's just like jumping out of the plane without a parachute. Chances that we're gonna land on a stack of pillows are close to zero. Secure software development lifecycle process ensures that security assurance activities such as penetration testing or code review and architectural analysis are an integral part of the development effort. With that in place, it's way easier to create secure software, as security is a continuous concern. Detect early flaws in the system, reduce cost as a result of early detection and resolution of issues, and overall reduction of intrinsic business risks for the organization by raising awareness of security considerations by stakeholders. Generally speaking, a secure software development lifecycle is set up by adding security-related activities to an existing development process. For example, writing security requirements alongside the collection of functional requirements, or performing an architecture risk analysis during the design phase of the software development lifecycle. There are definitely some actions that can be taken by developers or testers in their day-to-day activities to improve the security posture of your organization. I want to emphasize this very strongly here, that it's our responsibility as especially chief technology officers or management to educate ourselves and coworkers on the best secure coding practices and available frameworks for security. And it's one of the things we help doing, by the way. Becoming paranoid with security, on the other hand, is also not a good idea, as with all extremes. I mean, it would be great for all products, but unless we are not a bank or any ultra-specific data processing company, it is recommended to stay reasonable with our actions. As I mentioned earlier, it's practically impossible to identify every potential system flaw. We should put enough effort to try to identify the most crucial ones especially, without spending horrendous amount of time, of course. And there are a couple of techniques that can be used that will help us get the knowledge about the system holistically and also identify the areas where risk might be the highest. And then we can focus more only on those specific areas. We should end up with a list of all risks, well, all important ones that are connected to our product. Next step is to assign to each of them the cost of failure that it can generate, the expected loss, and also what is the level of predicted probability of it happening in production. With that done, it's very easy to prioritize all of them. Only those with the high effect should be considered as ones to apply countermeasures. Of course, it all depends on the available resources. So a classic risk assessment job basically. If you are not familiar with how it works, we can discuss it in more details after the presentation. The cool part is that it gives a holistic view of the system as a whole, raising awareness among developers about potential problems and even show possible wrong use cases we could have forgotten about. Risk assessment is a good exercise for every project, but if your solution uses one of the following areas of technology, I would say is a must-have in a development process. The one of the top and obvious ones are of course data storage of any kind. It might be local or in the cloud, but almost every app or piece of software is meant to hold and process some sort of data that needs to be stored somewhere. In most cases, we deal with users' very private and confidential information. It's our responsibility to make sure that those data will be top secret and we won't share or give access to them to any third party without our or our users' knowledge. The concept and practice of securing storage are gaining momentum, but it still hasn't really taken off. And that's pretty odd considering the business risk involved. Storage vulnerabilities have been proven. In fact, many weaknesses are very easily exploited, providing illicit access to everything electronic in your business. Some serious gotchas that are often overlooked include lack of adequate access controls on shared files, lack of sufficient audit trails, and vulnerable web-based storage management interface accessible from both inside and outside of the network. There are thousands of possibilities, but all it takes is one flaw to be exploited to put your storage system at risk. The real business risks are associated with data at rest, not data in transit. But it doesn't mean we should forget about protecting sensitive information as it crosses the wire or the airwaves. Although communication itself isn't the worst part usually, as SSL or OAuth are pretty standard now. Definitely for particular kinds of products is super crucial. The real challenge is to make sure we prevent all users' data versus just single user's data, which usually comes down to designing and developing secure backend API, as that's the place where all collected and hopefully encrypted data is gathered and accessible. A secure API is one that can guarantee the confidentiality of the information it processes by making it visible only to the users, app, and servers that are authorized to consume it. Likewise, it must be able to guarantee the integrity of the information it receives from the clients and servers with which it collaborates, so that it will only process such information if it knows that it has not been modified by a third party. To guarantee those two security qualities, the ability to identify the calling systems and their end users is a prerequisite. It also applies to those calls that the API makes to the third-party servers. An API must never lose information, so it must be available to handle requests and process them in a reliable fashion. If our business has a mobile application, might be worth mentioning that environments our apps might be running on may vary from those officially released systems. Jailbreaks and rooted devices are still a thing in today's world, and we have to remember that permissions on those systems are completely different than in those official secure releases. Every running software, including the ones from our products, is constructed from code by developers. They might be using external third-party libraries and frameworks to optimize their work or support external services. It is also important to check if those third-party additions are secure and updated on a regular basis. There might be a case like with games, for example, that we want to be sure that no one is going to try to modify and tamper with them in their favor, or to distribute omitting us, or again steal our technology and work to create a competitor product. Cryptography and encryption key management is closely connected to software security. It's just important to mention that there should be a policy to be sure to update those once in a while. Technology might change and we should be ready for that. And most of the time, the weakest link in a chain is a human. And it's okay, we all make mistakes. It makes us humans. We just need to be aware of that and counteract. Things like storing and sharing important keys and credentials are the things we don't usually think about. The most secure system won't win if someone is just gonna simply take over admin credentials from someone. Creating office policy in terms of communication and data importance is as essential as secure data encryption. So, as you can see, it means almost everybody should care about security. The last and good motivation for everyone might be different regulations of data storing that might result in millions of dollars of fines. It's an endless fight. If we are going to forget about one thing that is going to be exploited, should be way easier to fix and won't look as bad as just having everything on the plate waiting to be taken, especially when explaining ourselves before investors or company board. Also, a security audit is part of the process of due diligence. A business should have one person responsible for security matters. Without a dedicated person, that responsibility will usually be handled by a CTO or head of technology. Looking at all possible security issues that can occur, we can generalize those into three separate categories: policy, threat model, and mechanisms. A policy is a statement of what our system is supposed to be doing, all the goals we are trying to achieve at some point. So for example, stuff like confidentiality, so who will have access to certain parts of the system; integrity, so things about modifying data and content, but also things like availability to the users. For example, saying that account X should have access to our admin panel is completely different policy than saying that no one else except account X should have access to our admin panel. Real life example can be a security question to reset account password. Knowing a password might be one thing, but adding personal info like school dog names, etc. changes the deal, especially for famous or public people. Years ago, there was a case of Sarah Palin and her Yahoo account. Someone just simply figured out that all those answers for those questions can be found on her Wikipedia page. On Amazon, there was a case where you could buy something without logging in by simply providing credit card details and account email. And after that, use that new card info to reset the password. Next, you could have used the previous card last 4 digits to reset someone's Apple account if you were lucky. And that could have been a backup account for Google, for example. I'm not joking, that all was actually a case in the past. So, threat model is basically a knowledge about the adversary, all the techniques, points of access, and possible motivations for bad guys trying to compromise our data. It's basically trying to look through their eyes on our software to understand which part should be especially taken care of. Good start for a risk assessment and for the team to look at the system holistically. We should never assume that user passwords are safe, in most cases even with our password requirements. That's why we should be extra careful about users' access rights. Another thing is that computing power is increasing every year. Not updating, for example, our encryption algorithms can be catastrophic over time. Like with Kerberos protocol developed on MIT in the mid-80s. Not using certificate pinning, for example, might mean that the bad guy needs to compromise just one certificate authority in the world. Also, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency was super sure that they created a secure system that they hired a bunch of people to try to break it in. And one of the teams has discovered that the system codebase is on a server in one of the employee rooms, and its security wasn't the best. So they broke in there, created a system backdoor in code, and waited for the next release, and used that to compromise the system later on. And mechanisms means all the software and hardware solutions that is making sure our policy is followed as long as the bad guys is following our assumptions from the threat modeling. Again, I will point out that it's impossible to secure our systems so they will be unbreakable. It is a matter of making it really hard, or at least in a reasonable time frame for them. Let me refer to more modern and mobile problems that were discovered in recent years. All of them are already fixed, by the way. Let's start with Snapchat. Its idea was to remove messages after a certain amount of time. It was done by sending a remove requests from the client. But because it was optional, there was created a couple of apps using Snapchat API, exploiting that vulnerability, and then there was a leak of thousands of photos from those third-party servers. Tinder, as a dating app, was showing, and still is, a distance to your match. It's okay, the distance is only an approximation, so no need to worry. But as it turned out, internally, in a response from the API, there was for each match the exact lat-long location provided. And that was not cool. So of course they had to fix that first by just sending only the distance that was being calculated on the server side. So no location in the response anymore. But another mistake was that the distance was provided with 15 digits accuracy. And with that precision, you can easily scan for users from 3 different locations and triangulate the exact locations of particular match. Later on, also that problem was resolved once exposed. WhatsApp is another interesting example. Super successful product with billions of users. Well, messaging apps in general are a category themselves in security. But let's focus on WhatsApp right now. Following vulnerabilities were found when it already had a dozen of millions of users. Firstly, the number verification process. It's a great idea. Prevent someone else from using our private number. It turned out that verification code was created on the client, so on the mobile side, and sent to a service to then send it back as an SMS with that exact verification code to a specified number. It meant with a single device, an attacker could easily verify every given number in the app. Also, as a bonus, because there was no validation on the verification code, that API could be used to send free SMSs to any number worldwide. 120 characters were the limitations of the SMS itself, minus a couple of words from the WhatsApp. Someone else has discovered that to change app number's status, you don't have to authenticate. It was a simple GET request. So it was super simple to change anyone's status to whatever we wanted. There was even a website where you could do that easily. Also, that is pretty scary was that the first quick fix was just to block all requests from just that website. Also, remembering to limit the number of requests is important, especially for signing in purposes. Apple once had a problem with that, and because usually users' passwords are rather simple, it was very easy for someone to brute force all possible combinations. For WhatsApp, it was an API to retrieve statuses when uploading contact book. In one request, you could easily get millions of statuses for real phone numbers. Just imagine what a marketing tool that could have been. This webinar purpose was of course not to teach how to write a secure system. It would be impossible. My idea was to evangelize security, to raise awareness and educate people that should feel responsible for those tasks in their companies. So they would try to introduce some of the security-related activities into the process of software and hardware development. Building product for months or years and then losing everything in just one day isn't the best idea. That's why it's way better to prevent things from happening, or at least trying to minimize the probability of it happening in production. So, dance like nobody's watching and encrypt like everyone is. Thank you very much.